Hello everyone, welcome back to the table. Today we're going to play some Platoon Commander Battle Group Kursk. I don't know how many people were expecting this to come out to be played, but yeah, I got this and it is time to put it out to the table. Well, let's see, where am I starting at? We're going to start with Scenario 3. Scenario 1 is really more of like a primer scenario where it has 4 Russians up on a hill and there's like a whole bunch of advancing Germans that they have to hold out against. And, you know, it's alright. It kind of gives you an idea how the rules play. The second one, Breach of the First Defensive Belt. That takes both of the maps. And for this, I thought playthrough, I would want to just play on one map. So that would be Scenario 3 is going to be what we're playing on today. That uses one map. Uses map B specifically. So the story is, on July 6, 1943, commander of the Soviet Central Front Commander Army General Rokossowski orders a counterattack, but only the 16th Tank Corps of the 2nd Tank Army responds, running headlong into elements of the 505th Heavy Tank Battalion and the 9th Panzer Division. Alright, so we're on map B, victory points. So each, well, I won't go into the details of victory points. That'll come at the end. And basically, it's got a little chart here where if you get 5 more victory points, it's an operational German victory, so on and so forth. So we'll take a look at that later. I guess I could show you what I'm looking at. So what I did was I went ahead and set up the German forces first, as per the rules. It's 2 Tiger 1 platoons and then 6 Panzer 4 platoons. They deploy anywhere on the map between and including hex column A and E. So that's what we have over here, A through E. Just to start off, I do have Panzer 4. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Alright, so I've also stacked them to where it's 2 platoons. So 2 Panzer 4s. I put the 2 Tigers somewhat centrally located. That way we can kind of push up. There's some hills and some obstacles in the way, but I'm hoping if I can maybe take this central hill area, maybe that could give me some good, you know, visibility. I can shoot down on stuff, maybe. We'll see. And then we have the other 4 Panzer 4 platoons, which are right down here at the south. So they'll be covering the southern flank. And that's what I did for the Germans. For the Soviet player, it's 12 T-34-76s, 2 KV-1s, and 2 152s. The beast. So what we've got here is, because there's so many, I've pretty much have just taken the eastern side of the board along. It said you could do like Q through R, it's just be these 2 columns, so I said, well, we'll just put everything along that particular column. So up here, again, everything's kind of double stacked. Let's see, if I zoom in, I might have to readjust the camera angle a little bit. So we have a wall of T-34, so T-34, T-34, KV-1s, and then as we progress along to the south, we've also got the SU-152s and then more T-34s. So I'm going to pull out here, and that's what we have. A lot of this is going to be fighting around this town of Godanovo, and you're going to capture some of that, and that's kind of where we're going to head to. Alright, also on the map you can see there's a few hill areas here. Again, if you can command maybe the high ground, shoot down at things, but then things can shoot back at you. Combat in this is somewhat abstracted. It really focuses more on your maneuvering of troops and forces and putting them into positions of, you know, advantage is what we're looking at. And that's what we're going to play with. Now it does say couple special rules here for scenario. Treat this Minoye pole action cards as artillery cards. I think someone said this was like a mine launcher that the Soviets had, but this is going to be treated as an artillery card with 4 firepower if I draw it. Then the German player can play any card as an op fire card once per turn. Op fire card's pretty good because that will allow a unit that's fired to fire regardless of their status. So that's actually a really good card. And I'm going to have them off to the side. So we've got the cards here. I'm going to draw, well, let's shuffle them up here just real quick and mix them. All right, we're going to draw 2 for the Soviets. Sniper attack, so disrupt target unit. Target must be within 4 hexes and have a clear line of sight to a city, town, or forest hex. Good, because it's sniping from cover. And then we have Niet. Negates last German card played, must be played immediately after card is played. So as soon as the German player plays something, we can just say, nope, not today. And then I'll have off to the side 2 German cards. We'll have Artillery Barrage, which is an 8 firepower attack. That's pretty devastating. And then we have Focused Fire. Shift the fire results table column 2 to the right. Wow, I can do that during fire or movement. The reason why you would have that during movement is for if you do moving fire, which would counteract the fact that you're moving and have that move penalty, or if your opponent's moving and you use that for op fire. So, sounds good. Alright, that's what we've got. So, and then I'll just stick the rest of the cards over here as well. Alright, the last thing we're going to do is set up the turn tracker. And my table is kind of cluttered today. So what I think I'll do, I'm going to rearrange a couple things and then we'll come back and start the turn of events here. Alright, so just one moment. For today, we'll be using our new dice tower that we got with Normandy, beginning of the end. And I'll be using the Army Painter laser pointer. None of these items were given to me, so it's not a product plug. It's just these are things I like to play with. Well, I'm assuming I'll like to play with this dice tower. It'll be the first time using it. And then I have set up over here, you know, sorry for the glare and the lighting there, but we have the turn tracker set up with a sequence of play that we'll be trying out. Now, over here for initiative, it's not initiative as far as who has initiative. This is a box where you can buy yourself initiative rolls, and we'll talk about some of the focus and aid markers later on. And as we play, I'll probably give some thoughts and opinions on different mechanics. Overall, I played this scenario probably a little year and a half or so ago when doing some of the testing, and it's actually, for me, it was kind of fun. I didn't play it solo. I actually played it with a face-to-face opponent, and we'll see how this plays out solo. But if this is very similar to what I did before, we'll see a lot of dead vehicles. Alright, so we're going to get started here. I might have to sneeze. Yep, hold on. Wow, it's tough to edit out sneezes. Alright, so with this, it doesn't start, in the special standard rules, it doesn't say who starts with initiative. So I'm going to roll. So again, I'm going to use my special red Soviet die that I had laying around, and black for the German player. Alright, so Germany, we'll get that. And it is 6 game turns, so we're going to see what kind of carnage we can cause in 6 turns. So after looking at I'm just going to move that. I might put that, yeah, it's a small tower, I can move it onto the board when I need it. Alright, so in the sequence of play, it says determine initiative, done. Draw action cards. It does say for the rules that we won't draw action cards until turn 2 because we start with 2 cards already, so I'll skip that. Then there's a rally phase. I have no units that are disrupted, so we don't need to rally them. Then we do fire phase. Fire phase, you alternate starting with the initiative player, and I would just have to take a quick peek. The only thing I have with like super long range is that Tiger tank. Range works on the color band, so up here is the armor piercing firepower. Red, short range is out to 3 hexes, normal range is out to 5, 10 is long range. And I don't think I'm in 10 of anything. But it doesn't matter because his line of sight is currently blocked. So even if I count it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I'm not quite in range, but there's still a lot of blocking stuff. and vice versa. Same thing would go for the Russian player. There currently is nothing. Now, what you could do is, in your mind, think ahead a little bit. You can do what's called the moving fire, so shoot and fire. That happens during the move segment, so you would move a little bit, shoot, or you could shoot and then move, and you get half of your movement round down. That might be an option, because as the player who lost initiative, you could maybe bide your time, wait to see where people are going, and then it goes either way. I could say, well, as a Tiger driver, maybe I'm going to move a couple hexes and shoot, but there's nothing that really gives me a clear line of sight. What I could do, thinking, is move up to this hilltop, but I have 4 movement. That's what this center number is, and it's on a gold explosion. That means I can move and shoot. And then just going back to the rules, when you read about this, for those who are curious, it is rule 4.4. So if the explosion is blue, such fires is shifted 2 columns left. If the explosion is orange, I guess that's orange, kind of gold to me, but you shift the column 1 to the left. And what that represents is possibly stabilization, primitive optics. Definitely wouldn't be as good as, say, like an M1 Abrams tank or something like that. Okay, so there's no fire, so we would move on to the movement phase. Movement phase, instead of alternating where one player fires, the other player fires, movement's slightly different. The initiative player has the option of moving everything that they want right now, and then the Soviet player would be able to move everything they want. And that's where I was looking here at the movement, because I've got 4 movement points. The clear hexes don't affect movement, but going up 1 level costs a movement point. So I could actually move these tigers right here, and then hopefully on a turn, let's see, 1, 2, 3. I'm actually going to move them here. That way I can pop up and maybe move and then do moving fire to take stuff out. I could be setting him up for failure because he might get swarmed by T-34s, but we'll see. And when I say he, it's a stack of 2, so I should say them. 5 movement points here on the Panzer IVs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now they can get up here. Oh, you know what I need to do? I have over here all my little fancy move and fire markers. So he's moved, or I should say they've moved. Then over here, they're controlling the southern route. They can't cross the river except for at like the bridge. Let me double check that. I believe rivers are not passable. They don't block. Oh, it's just +2 to cross the hex side. Or yeah, +2 for infantry. There's no infantry in this. This is all tanks. So +1 to cross hex side. So we would have to cross the hex side. I would add 1. Oh, they can ford the river. I guess that's not too bad. So if I want to keep and maintain a southerly defense, we can come down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm just going to shift it down a little bit so you can see where we came through. So we were up on this hilltop here, or right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that way we've got not quite a clear shot, but we can start holding this southern flank. And we've got this unit here. Part of me wants to rush to the city because we want to start maybe establishing our presence and defense of the city. So we're going to go 1. Now along the roads, because I can take that road, it says here, regardless of other terrain and hex, when entered from a contiguous road hex, otherwise cost of terrain and hex. Okay, so I would pay the cost of the terrain to get onto the road, then after that I ignore it. And then +1 movement factor if entire movement allowance is spent on road. So since I'm spending part of my movement to get onto the road, I wouldn't be able to add +1 to my movement. So I'm going to take my 5 movement points and I move onto the road for 1 movement point, 2 movement points, 3 movement points, 4 movement points, 5 movement points. Had I spent, as it says, all my movement allowance, I could have gone 6. But we're at the outskirts of the city. Cool. So they'll get a moved. I'll flip that so I can read that. That's, I think, another reason why I like platoon level. You know, just zoom it out a little bit. I'm not worried about the minutia of vehicle facing, things like that. I do enjoy that from time to time, but sometimes I like to just move stuff. Alright, moving through the woods here, since we'll probably start here at the south. Again, woods cost is 2 for these vehicles here. So we'll go, yeah, it's just 2. I was looking to see if it's like +1 or anything like that. So, okay. 1, 2, well, do we want to move along here? 1, let me shift here a little bit. I'm thinking if we move south, maybe we can start to engage some of these German vehicles. So we're going to go 1, 2, I didn't look to see how the half hex plays. It's got a Q, let's see, that's a O. I'll play it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to put the T-34s right there on the edge of that forest. That's going to give them a little bit of protection against the Germans that are coming up. And then we have maybe a similar deal here. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're just going to start rushing things up. rushing things up. And then we've got some T-34s here. They're on this side of the river, so 1, 2, 3. And it says +1 across the hex side. So if this actually had terrain in there, let me scoot it up a little bit. You know, it'd be the cost of the terrain +1 for crossing the river. But that's clear. So we could go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then be ready to come into the city. Because the city itself, it's a town, city, 3 or more hex. That's a city. And it's already 3 movement for tanks to get in there. I wouldn't have enough to cross the river and enter the city. So I'd want to cross the river early and come up. So he could eventually come up into the city over the bridge. But I have a whole lot coming here. So what we'll do is keep them south. They're going to try and wipe out the German player down here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's starting to bring things close to combat. Probably not a good idea that I put them down there by themselves. Okay, these Su-152s, they are amazing. What I should have done was smarter planning and put the Su-152s up north, because the Russian player, Soviet player, got to place second, and then he wouldn't have to move far to then have shots down onto the Tigers. As it stands, these Su-152s don't have a clear line of sight to anything, so their range is going, you know, kind of to waste a little bit. And if I could get them on the edges of a city firing out, they'd be good. I don't know if I want to put them into the city. Kind of really limits all their fancy range. So we're going to race T-34s. Now this one is starting on the road, so he would add 1 movement factor for 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's what they're going to do. They're going to catch these Panzers out here, the Panzer IVs, out in the open, and pummel them. Pummel, pummel, pummel. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he has now entered the zone of control. That puts him adjacent, also puts them possibly later on for close assault. Tanks can close assault each other. The KVs also have a little bit more firepower than the T-34s. The firepower number is the same, but the range is a little bit more on the KV-1S. But where do I want to put them? That's tough to say. And I think part of this too is I'm trying to get my German forces off the board. So I want to kind of leave them in a position where they can shoot at stuff coming, maybe get opportunity fire later on. What I am going to do though is move this group up here, because again I want to create overlooks, and I'll go ahead and put him here. That's 2 movement points because it's 1 for the clear and 1 point to move up the hill. Now this terrain here, these little speckled patterns, those are low hills. It's 1 movement point. It is rolling. It does block. So when sighted from ground level, second hex blocks line of sight. When either fired or target is on hill, rolling terrain doesn't block line of sight. So there are, if they're on a hill, it doesn't block line of sight. But if you're on the ground, it can block line of sight. It says especially through 2 of these. So this is almost like degrading terrain in other games. So a little bit of rolling hills, but these are actually like big tall hills. See, and that's what I wanted to be careful of, because when I move my tigers up here, they're going to have a nice command of the field. So I want to be careful and not put the, like my good stuff, the KV-1s and my SU-152s in a lot of danger, but they still need to be out there to engage. Now, the KV-1S has a gold range, 4 hexes for their like optimal fire, the normal range. So let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4. See, I was thinking about putting the KVs right here. Since they're already in the open, when they return fire, this will put them at normal range, because I really want to bring the tigers here. I'm metagaming. I am metagaming. I know exactly what people are going to do. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what I'm going to do. 1, 2. Move him there. That way when he's returning fire, he's not suffering shifts because of range. He is in his normal range. And that leaves the SU-152s. They have a normal range of 5. Well, let's see here. They only got to move up 1. So they are now there. And that brings a lot of firepower to bear. Awesome. After movement phase, we have close assault phase. Now, again, starting with the initiative player, when you have units that are adjacent to other units, you can initiate close assault. And then once a close assault has been declared, then your opponent does a close assault. So you can alternate the close assaults. So just because you have moved a lot of stuff up, your opponent might declare, in order. I don't know what advantage there is to that, but it alternates. Here, I've only got the potential for 1 close assault. That's these folks versus these folks. And I don't think that's what I want to do, because the close assault factor is this box down there. 4 and 4. Yeah, it's just 1-to-1 results, and 1-to-1 odds do favor. I'm just trying to think here. It does favor the attacker even on 1-to-1, because the defender is here. I mean, if I rolled a 0, they would have to take 8 checks. It might be worth it. It might be worth it. Let me think about that for a second while I blow my nose. Yeah, I thought about it for a moment, and just for fun, go big or go home. We're going to go ahead and do the assault. So right now, it is 1-to-1 odds, because I've got 2 tank units. Oh, he's upside down. So that's 4 and 4 is 8, and the defender also has 4 and 4. Now, the terrain doesn't play a part in this. It's just strictly numbers at this point. Now, my first thought to that would be, but if I'm outside of the defensive terrain and I'm assaulting into defensive terrain, oh, let me see. I had a moment there. It does. So we have a city. Where's the defense? Yeah, this might change my mind. Oh, yeah, see, so for tanks, there's no benefit to that. So you're in city streets, close up and fighting, there's no modifier. If you were infantry, then there would be a defensive shift for fighting in the cities, but I forgot. There's no infantry, so I was right. The tanks, there's no shift. The terrain doesn't play a part in that. And I was, thinking, gosh, does that really make sense? Because maybe the person in the building, they're, in small structures, hidden, well, whatever the case may be. We're out on the city streets and the fighting is up close and personal. There's a video on YouTube I watched where I think it was a Pershing tank and it was in a city fight with a Panther, and it showed that, like, it was actual some combat footage. It shows like the Pershing firing, and it shows the Panther getting hit and knocked out, or the aftermath, and it's burning and you see people crawling out of the Panther. And that wasn't like really far away, that was up close. So this close assault makes sense for them. And I guess when you're in the city, open city streets like that, there really isn't any cover because you have to get close in order just to see down the street to identify target and fire. Well, anyway, long story short, let's close assault. Now we do have 1-to-1 odds. So what I'm going to do is bring the tower on. Hello, tower. And I'm going to drop 6. That's not too spectacular. In fact, that might not work for me at all. So 4 through 6, 1-to-1. Oh yeah, this was bad. So the defender is going to make 3 checks, and the attacker is going to make 5. So the defending player has a morale of 3. So this is a question that's come up on the board where it says, what's the morale of the troops involved? So it's section 2.3 of the rules. I'm going to grab that for you real quick here. I think it's, yeah, right here. So this is in the beginning where it's kind of explaining the phases. I'm going to try and do this without knocking the camera all around. It does say in the MSR, it doesn't define MSR. MSR is like main scenario module scenario rules. For this particular module, it says, unless stated otherwise in the scenario, the Germans' morale is 5 and the Soviets' morale is 3. So that's for this game. Like everything in this game, Germans have a 5 morale, Soviets have a 3, unless special rules say otherwise. That's important because in the very first scenario, it says that those Russians who are defending the hilltop, when they're on the hilltop, they have a morale of 4. Otherwise, they have a morale of 3. So I'm going to roll for the defender first. So the defender gets to roll 3 dice because they are taking potential hits. Now, another question came up is, why do you have to roll morale? You know, if I did 3 hits, I did 3 hits. Well, the morale roll represents a combination of things. It represents you know, all those little things that you don't necessarily want to have a rule or a table for. It's just really abstracted out. Again, it's to focus on the movement of troops and a smooth flow of combat. So the morale does represent how accurate the fire may be. Not the fact that these shells actually hit the target, but it's going to be how accurate they are. So the misses could be accounted for, you know, experience of individual drivers, dips in terrain, the enemy's moving, shifting around. They're also trying to get good positions to fire. It could represent deflections of shots on armor. You know, there's just a number of things that might say, yes, that was a potential hit, but it didn't actually score home. So, Russian player with a morale of 3, they failed 1. Well, they passed 1 because that's a 2. Then they failed 2 of these. The 9 and 7 are fails. So that means with 2 failures, they're going to be disrupted. And let me grab a disruption. I got one here. So they're disrupted. Oh, it's 2. So the whole stack is disrupted because they failed 2. If it was only 1 platoon in there, it would be disrupted and flipped. Now that was something else that came up where people were saying, well, it doesn't make sense that because you put more tanks in a spot, they're more susceptible to being fired at. But the idea is, again, these are not individual vehicles. These are platoons, and they're spread out over a front. So just because you put more stuff together doesn't mean they're necessarily 1 or 2 feet apart from each other. They're actually probably yards apart from each other. A lot of times when you watch the tank warfare, they actually do spread themselves out to prevent things like their buddy exploding and then getting shrapnel and things and all over them. So they do spread themselves out. So just because you put 8 tanks in a yardage like 150 yards wide, it doesn't mean that they're any closer to each other. And then you might say, well, then why are the hits distributed? All the hits should be focused in on one thing. Well, again, the idea was talking about overall combat effectiveness. And Mark explained this in a post, which I thought made sense. He said that if you shoot at one platoon and apply those 2 hits to that one platoon, maybe you've destroyed half of the vehicles, 2 out of 4. That's 50% of their fighting power gone. That would make sense. When you put 8 tanks together fighting as a unit, then what happens is if you destroy those same 2 tanks, now they're just down to 25%. They've lost 25% of their fighting power. So it's just kind of like an odds kind of a thing, distribution of hits, because those tanks aren't necessarily all firing at the exact same vehicle. Now, that made sense. I'm okay with that. But he did say that for the next game, The Long Road, and maybe if you want to try for yourself, there is going to be, I don't know if it's an optional rule or a rule that they're baking in, but he's testing where you can actually just go ahead and designate one platoon in the stack as target. So if you want to house rule that change here for your game, totally cool. So if I'm shooting into a stack of 2 platoons, I might say I'm only firing at a particular platoon, and that way I can plink away one platoon and then the other instead of spreading the hits. So there you go, little tip from me to you. House rule, it's your game. Do what you need to do to have fun with it. Alright, so that was the Russian player that just made their checks. So both get marked with fired. I didn't forget to roll for the Germans. I'm just putting these fired, and I'm just going to leave them move because they're moved and fired. But the German player had to make 5 checks. Ooh, okay, their morale is 5. Oh, nice. Yeah, let me check something here. Yeah, I just reminded myself. 0 on a die 10 actually counts as a 0. It doesn't count as 10. So with that roll, the German player suffered no casualties whatsoever. No disruptions or anything like that from his close assault. Wowzer. Alright, then looking at sequence of play, we move on to housekeeping, which we then remove all of the moved and fired markers. Leave the disrupted markers. I should probably pause the game while I do this. You don't want to watch me take markers off. Or maybe you do. I know I like watching myself take markers off. Okay, so I got a stack of markers off to the side. Then we do aid and focus phase. Now with this, you have your commanders. Like some games, your commander is like an actual individual figure that you can put on the board. You can attach them to units. They move around. It represents a person by name usually. But here we have, again, they're abstracted. And it keeps the rules simple. So you could almost think of this as maybe the battalion commander driving around in jeeps and things like that. But basically, you have 2 of these tokens. One is focus and the other is aid. What you do with focus is you can put it on a unit, or generally you put it like with a unit, and when that unit does like an attack roll or something like that, you can spend the focus to re-roll 1 die. It also has a flip side too. So with your aid and focus, what you're going to do is decide, do I buy the focus to enhance maybe combat, or I could stick it on the initiative spot over here. So when I roll initiative, I could spin that focus to re-roll initiative, the initiative box, or stick it with a unit to influence combat, or I could pick the aid, and then I could either stick that with a unit to try and help with the morale rolls during the morale check, that kind of a thing, or during combat it's a morale check. And then you could also, because when it comes onto the board, it's initially on the 1 side, and then you could use one of those actions to flip it to the 2 side, and then as you say do 1 roll, you'd reduce it to the 1 side. So they get spent as you use them, and then you only do 1 at a time. So what would I do here? So for the German player, probably what I would do is I'm going to put focus on the Tigers because they're about to move into position and I want them to get possibly a really, really good roll. Then for the Soviet player, I'm going to put aid here on that disrupted stack, because that means, you know, it signifies supplies and things. So it could be that maybe there's medics there, or a mechanical truck since there's no infantry, but possibly there's some repair trucks, fuel truck coming in, something that will help motivate those T-34s to get back into action. Okay, so that would be aid and focus. Then we advance the turn marker. Then we start the next turn. We roll for initiative. Normally I would like stop the camera, but this kind of moves quick here. Where's my red die? Okay, this time for sure there's no tie, so turn 2 starts with the Soviet player. Then we're going to draw action cards. Now during that last turn I didn't play action cards, mostly because when I solo play, I'll be honest, I sometimes totally forget I even have action cards. Which is, you know, okay, because to me that kind of shows that the cards really aren't necessary, because I've played games where folks don't like cards or card assisted, and they think that it unfairly balances the game. So this game wasn't designed with the cards in mind. Like, you could totally play this without the cards. So the first card I draw for the Soviet player, Smash Fascism, I'm guessing is what that says. I can play this during the rally phase. Raise the morale of all Soviet unions by all Soviet units 1 point for the remainder of the turn. Ooh. German player, Stalin's organ. Oh wait, sorry. German player, aggressive leadership. Remove the moved or fired marker from 1 unit, and I can play that during the fire or movement. Counts as an action, but would allow you to do something. Okay, I'm going to set those aside. Those are actually really good. Those I like a lot. Okay, then after our action cards is the rally phase. Now I'm going to play for the Soviet player, Smash Fascism. Raises the morale of all Soviet unions, again, Soviet units, 1 point for the remainder of the turn. I don't have a no or 999 card, so I'm going to, for this turn, raise the morale of all Soviet units to a 4. And I will probably forget that I did that, but for now, there it is. And I did that because it says play during the rally. So the card tells you when you can play it. So that's a rally. And now that's important because I have 2 Soviet units that are disrupted. Plus I gave them aid, so if I fail a roll I can re-roll. They failed. Alright, so even raising it to a 4 didn't help. But I'm going to spin the aid. I only have 1, it's on the 1 die side, so I spin those resources, I get the 0. One of those units will be fixed. They're not disrupted. So I get rid of my aid. So long, aid. And I'm going to shift the disrupted one down. So this one on top is good to go. There's no other units that are disrupted or need that. Okay, so now we go to the fire phase. So again, the Soviet player has initiative. The reason why this isn't so good as it may seem is because the German player is still protected. I think the only options really would be here. I could fire up, or down here we can fire across. The hills aren't going to stop anything. All of these have clear line of sight, and he's got clear line of sight back, but the Soviet player gets to fire first. Up here he could fire back. When I say fire back, the Soviet player could go ahead and shoot and try to score some disruptions, but he's only got 1 unit that could do that. The disrupted unit won't be able to fire. They're trying to reorganize themselves from the close assault as the tanks are getting up close and shooting and pulling away. Oh, you know what? The other thing too that I totally did not do, and I could do, I forgot, is, which because I forgot, I'm not going to go back and fix it, because when you're trying to play and explain things you sometimes forget stuff. Because the defender actually took more hits than the attacker, the defender is supposed to retreat out of the hex, and then the attacker can move in. If the defender scores more hits, the attacker is already outside the hex, they don't have to retreat. That's one reason I like kind of how they do close assault here, is you assault from the adjacent hex. That way it's really easy to keep track of where the victor goes. But in this case, I totally forgot to move the Russian out. Soviet, it calls him Soviet in the book, so I'm trying to remember that. So anyway, I am not going to reverse that because I missed it, forgot about it, and I don't want to seem like I'm cheating. Although conversely, some people might say, well, because you caught it before it really affected anything, you could fix that, and that's not cheating. It might be even cheating if you didn't move them. So I tell you what, in situations like that, I roll a die. On an even roll, I will move him back. On an odd roll, they'll stay where they are. Odd. They'll stay where they are. And I will do my best to remember for the next close assault that if the defender is losing, they have to retreat. Now back to the carnage. Yeah, since he's only got one platoon of tanks that can fire, he might not score very many hits. So what we'll do is leave them there. And we're going to come down here and we are going to check and see what we can do here. This is the closer unit, and their color for attack is green. When I look at my combat chart, green short range is 1, normal range is 3, long range is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's long range. They're all long range to each other, which means it's a 2-column shift to the left. Really inaccurate firing. Do we want to move and shoot? I think what I'll do is shoot with this group and maybe move and shoot with that group, or move and shoot with them. So right now, because they're at long range, so they're going to go ahead and shoot. Now the way you do this is you take a look at your armor piercing value, which for this tank is 8, versus the defense value here, which is a 4. Now there's a -1. We'll explain the -1 here in just a moment. So I'm going to take my 8 minus 4. I'm going to roll on the 4 column. So what I do is I'm going to roll. I rolled a 7. Let's see. One quick moment. Alright, I wanted to use the example from the book to explain the, it's called the unit specific modifier. So there's a -1 here next to the armor factor. And what that does is it lets the game scenario designers to tweak values, because a lot of people would probably argue that the T-34 had slightly better armor than, say, the Panzer IV because of the slope. So even though the Panzer IV added Scherzen, I can't say words very well, it still was not quite as well defended as like the T-34. So what happens is when we make our attack roll, that -1 is going to apply to the die roll to see how much damage we do. So it's possible that with a low enough roll, we might really make a change to bout. So we rolled a 7, -1 is 6. Now here's the thing too. This is something else. Because I've got 2 units firing, they can fire together. And this is why I like to have them stacked as well. Not only is it for hit displacement when they're taking damage, but now in the same hex they can fire together at a similar target. And this gives you 2 column shifts to the right. And I'll show you what the column shift means here in just a second. So at long range though, I get 2 column shifts to the left. So for 2 units firing at long range, there is no column shifts. There's no column shifts for terrain because they're in open terrain. So my 7 is a 6, and it's 4 firepower, 4 defense. So basically, I'm going to look here on the 6, come over here to the 4, because basically what you do is you apply like all the positive shifts and then the defensive shifts. So the positive is moving 2 column shifts over for 2 units firing, and then apply the negative shift because they're at long range, which brings me back to 4. And because we subtracted 1 from the roll because of the unit specific modifier, we're on the 4 to 6 column. That means 2 hits. Once you play it a little bit, it seems like a lot to explain how we get to this number, but after a while it's really intuitive and it doesn't take long to figure out. So now I know that my German stack has 2 potential hits. They're going to roll morale, 2 dice, and the 0 passed and 8 failed. So one of these gets disrupted. So even with a 5 morale, you know, you can still roll bad. So I'm going to say that this bottom Panzer IV unit was disrupted, and if I fired this T-34 group, the whole stack fired. Alright, that's not too bad, because now when they return fire, it won't be as effective because it's only one group, and they'll have column shift penalties because they don't have that other platoon firing with them. So it's only like 4 guns firing instead of 8, and that's 4 potential shots to spread amongst these 2. We're going to do it though. We're going to do it. So same thing, I do, it's green, which means they can long range out to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 8 firepower against 4 defense. No modifiers, so the T-34 is slightly armored better. So I'm going to make my 1 dice roll to see where on the chart I am. 4. I think the middle column is 4 to 6. So let's see how those shifts will affect this. So first of all, I'm going to start with the 4 because it's 8 firepower minus 4. 2 shifts due to range. On the 0 column, come down to 4. It's 1. So I then take my dice tower, roll. It's a 0, and that's a save. So the German player returned fire with his slightly reduced group, and then we alternate back to the German player, or the Soviet player. Now we would go ahead, we're going to try here. It's going to be the same situation, except now they're adjacent, so they're going to get a shift bonus on combat. And the road is open, so there's no defensive terrain, and there's only 1 platoon firing. So it's going to be 8 firepower, 4 defense. So I'm starting on the 4 column. Adjacent, well, short range, which is half. So 1 range is short. It's 1 column shift to the right. So I'm starting on a 4 and 1 column shift to the right for being adjacent. That's it. Since it's only 1 platoon firing, they don't get the 2 shifts. So basically these are cumulative. So if I was 2 T-34 platoons, I'd start at the 4 column, because you take the highest firepower in the group and work from there, and they're the same. So I'd start with 4. I would shift 2 because of the 2 platoons, you know, the extra firing unit, and 1 more for being adjacent. I could potentially be rolling on the 10, but since it's 1 platoon at short range, they're going to roll on the 6. They rolled, I said a 0, didn't I? Holy cow. And the Panzers have that -1 unit specific modifier, but I can't go lower than a 0. So that's 6 potential hits that platoon took from those T-34s. Holy cow. Talk about some lucky shooting. I don't even know how I would explain that narratively. That's just insane. 1 save, 2 saves, because again German morale is 5, so that means 2 fails. That means that whole stack is disrupted. And this guy, let me find a fired marker here. He fired. So that 1 platoon really took those guys to school. Said, this is how you do tank warfare, buddy. None of that close assault stuff. It's shooting time. Alright. Then it goes back to the German player. German player has no other clear shots. Yeah, because if you look up here, my Tiger tank, hills are in the way. Hills are in the way. Ooh, you know what? Well, I'm on a... Oh, they're up above the low hills. You know what? I think they can fire at those. Because, see, they couldn't have fired back because they're beyond range 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you know what? The Tigers can shoot out to range 10. Hoo, hoo, hoo. But I really wanted to move them up onto the hill and make them targets for... You know what? I think we're just gonna set those Tigers right there, and they're gonna go to town on those T-34s, which are up on a hill, which puts them up over the rolling hills, so they're not subject to the 2 hexes worth, 2 hexes of blocking. Yeah, they're gonna shoot up. Woo. All right. That's what we're going to do. So, German player says firepower 12, defense 4. So the Tiger starts on the 8 column. Now, check this out. There are 2 Tiger units. So they shift over 2, 1, 2. But it is at long range because it's beyond the 5 but less than 10. So that's 2 shifts back to the left. 1, 2. But I'm still rolling on the 8 column. Alright, so let's bring this down. So the Tiger tank could still potentially do some harm. Rolled a 1. And I'm not going to re-roll. I'm going to save this because I don't want to re-roll a 1. That's actually really good. So we go 7 potential hits. Rolling on the 8s, 7 potential hits. Oh snap, that is more 10-sided dice than I have that comes in the basic game. It gives me 6. So what I'm going to do is move this to where you can see it. I'm going to throw in the red die. Now remember, I did play the card giving the Soviet player a 4 morale. So 5 is a fail. 7 is... I'm actually going to take the successes out. 1 success, 2 successes. That means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fails. Ooh. Oh wait, I said 8. No, that's 7. 7. Okay, so we have to evenly distribute the hits because it's a bunch of tanks shooting at a bunch of tanks. We didn't focus on 1 platoon because I'm not playing with that rule. I'm just playing rules as written. Alright, so first of all, let's see if you can see that. Here's how we're going to do this. 2 of those will be to disrupt each. Then hits 3 and 4 would flip each of these. They have actually suffered some damage. Disruption can come off, but you can't recover the flip. That's 4 of my 5 hits. A 5th hit actually destroys 1 of those. Woo! The Tiger has spoken. I'm going to put a wreck there. Oh man. There you go. And that, let me find a fired marker, was a Tiger. Ladies and gentlemen. Boom! Shakalaka. Then we go back to the Soviet player. Now, this is where the Soviet player has to decide what to do. Now, you might say, wow, that's pretty good. Yeah, actually. Yeah, in fact, when it comes back to my turn as an action, I could do aggressive leadership, remove the fired marker from 1 unit, or the move marker, and have the Tigers fire again. But they've hurt that unit pretty good, so we'll probably wait. And I'm looking here. Oh, yeah, we could have done disrupt target unit. Target must be within 4 hexes of and have a clear line of sight to a city, town, or forest. Well, you know what I could have done now? It'd be a little late now. I could have played the sniper attack because that Tiger unit is within 4 hexes of and it has a clear line of sight to a city. And there's woods right there. Now, you might say, but Eddie, what's a sniper going to do? Well, the sniper can also represent, like it does say in other abstract games like Combat Commander, sniper could mean partisans with Molotov cocktails, different things like that. It could be any number of things. You could even say it was a mechanical failure on one of the vehicles. Mechanically, how that disruption occurs isn't the point. The fact that you can disrupt a unit, that's what's important. You know, so we don't actually have to roll a chart or anything like that, because, you know, if I had a separate chart that said roll here to see exactly what caused it, then if it said partisans making a Molotov attack, then I'd have to have rules for that. And, you know, at some point you just start to bog it down. This is really trying to focus on, you know, not the minutia of how everything happens, but the overall commanding and maneuvering of your forces. That's why I kind of like this a lot. So now I'm really stuck in decisions what to do, because those Tiger platoons are devastating. And if I move my KV-1s up, they have pretty good range, but I don't have line of sight. I might have line of sight to these Panzer IVs. The Panzer IVs were up on that hill, so actually we probably, the woods still would have blocked, I think. But look here, the KV-1s can shoot to the Panzer IVs, and I think that's why I moved them there, because gold has a max range of 8. I moved them here because the Tigers were going to come up here. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can actually go ahead and use my KV-1s to shoot at the Panzer IVs without having to move or expose myself to the Tigers any more than we have to. So we're going to take firepower 8, and the gold 8 is long range, so being at 6 I'm normal to long range. That's 2 column shifts to the left. So 8 minus 4. I'm going to roll a die. Let's see, I'm just going to move the camera over here a little bit for a moment. Now we do subtract 1 because I've got a unit specific modifier on the Panzer of -1. So we're on the 4 column. We shift 2 because of long range. We rolled an 8, we come down to 7, it's the same. So it's 1 potential hit. The German player has a morale of 5. Rolled a 4, if you can see that. So I wouldn't call that a wasted shot. I'd say that was more of a, oh, wait a minute, rewind, hold the phone. It's a stacked KV-1S. So we went 4, shifted 2, but shifted back. So that same roll of 7 is 2 potential hits. Okay, here's the second one. It's a 4. So we actually survived all of that. So we put fired on the KV-1s. Oh yeah, and the reason why we didn't get affected by the rolling hills is, again, they were on a hill. So they're shooting down across. But that means, though, that they can fire back. Let me see, what's long range on green? Long range on green is only 5. So actually those KV-1s are in a really good spot because they can outshoot the Panzer IVs. And I can't return fire. I could wait then till movement and do like the movement fire, you know, move up and then shoot, but you get a penalty for that too. So yeah, I might wait. But I still have a lot of Soviet units to do something with. Those T-34s, they are also green, which means they have a long range of 5. They're nowhere near. I should have moved them up closer. I was just afraid. Oh, I haven't even moved yet. Right, this is just fire. That's it. Nobody else can fire. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're blocked by rolling hills. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they're out of range. Okay, that makes that easy. We're done with shooting. Then we move on to movement. Okay, Russian player had the initiative. Yes, now I could think about moving up stuff. Let's start down here, because this would be probably the easiest place to start with, because he's already fired, so he can't op fire, and I don't have, I do have an artillery barrage. So I could drop artillery on these guys, which I think I will. So first of all, this T-34 unit wants to move up because it wants to put himself in range to shoot. He's going to put himself at a range of 3 because that would be normal range. So no penalties but no bonuses. So 1, 2, 3. So this would put him 3 out from the German platoon. Now he's not he could move and shoot. You know what, if he moves to do a move and shoot, he would be at long range. Blue, so that's 2 column shifts. He would have 4 column shifts, movement and long range. That would put him on, let's look. I would say it's almost always worth it because they're going to start at the 4. 2 column shifts for moving because it's on a blue background. 2 column shifts for long range. It'd be the -4. So we're going to move and shoot. We're going to move and shoot. We're going to move and shoot. So I don't forget, that does mark him with fired. So anytime you fire, and the reason we put the fire on there is even though you moved, but you fired, is because when it comes time for the assault phase, anything marked with fired, essentially, or disrupted, cannot initiate assault movement. So if all I did was move, and let's say I moved adjacent, then I could. But because I'm moving and then shooting, get marked with fired, then I can't initiate assault even if somebody was right there. Alright, so anyway, we already know we're on the -4 column. Let's roll that 1 die. A 0! Holy cow! I knew something like that would happen. I knew it! So even though it's -4, I rolled a 0. Oh, hey, and remember, Panzer IVs have that unit-specific modifier -1. I can't go below 0. So that's 2 potential hits. Ooh. We do have a morale of 5, though, as the German player. They're very fanatic. 0 and a 6. So one of those fails. So let's look at the stack. 1 unit was disrupted. So I'm applying 1 more disruption. So now they're both disrupted. And he has shot and fired. Now, this guy here has all this rolling hills in the way. But if I move and shoot, we'll be okay, because then he won't have 2 blocking. Do the same thing. 1, 2. Firepower 8, defensive 4. But it's the same thing. We're rolling on the -4 because of, you know what? I forgot. Again, because it's 2 platoons firing, there's a positive shift back. So actually they're rolling on they're rolling on the 0, because see, look, 4 -2 for moving, oh, it's short range. This one was long range. This one is normal range. So he would be 4 -2 for moving, +2 for having an additional buddy. So the other guy should have been -2 for moving, -2 for long range on the 0 column. So he gets 1 more roll. So we're going to roll 1 more die just to see if technically we should have done 1 more point of damage. Yes, we should have. So that would take one of these units, and because they're both disrupted, 1 is now wounded. Just to be fair, I went back in time, I caught it just now. I keep forgetting that one thing. If both fire, it's a bonus. Okay, so let me roll the die roll for the attack, and then we'll look at the column. 4. That's actually respectable. -1 because of the unit specific modifier, so it's a 3. Okay, so again we start with a 4. We apply positives first, so 1, 2 because you have additional shooters, -2 because they moved, and there's no further penalties because they're not long range. So we have a 4, it's actually a 3, 3 potential hits. Yeah, so that Panzer unit in the south was probably not smart to put them by themselves. Because they failed 2 more. Oh, noes. Okay, so 1 hit. Yep, because we had 2 hits. One hit would flip him because the disruption hasn't gone away. And then the second hit actually eliminates one. So those T-34s, through cunning, I should say, maneuvering and firing, have destroyed a platoon, so they get a wreck, and has disrupted and reduced that platoon. So they're just punching bags at this point. Let's find a fired marker. Fired. And they're done. Oh man. That SU-152, we're going to keep him there. Those T-34s we're going to move. They're going to move and shoot. That seems to be working out pretty good for people. I can only move 2 though. That still is going to put them out of range. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. Yeah, they couldn't shoot because 5 is their max range. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to move up here because that's 1, 2, 3. Those rolling hills are only 1 movement point as our guys drive through. Oh wait, we can't move. It's not movement. Yeah, it is. It's movement. We're not moving and shooting. We're just moving. That way, no matter where we're at, we can shoot those, or if the tigers move up, we can shoot at the tigers. The German player has nothing. Yeah, he does. He's got those guys. They're out of range, and yeah, the forest blocks there. I think they're going to stay put. Let's move into the woods. 1, 2. I will give them a little protection, and quite possibly we'll let them shoot at something coming up. Maybe, I don't know, could be a bad decision, but I'm all about bad decisions. Alright, okay, then back to the Soviet player over here. That SU-152, I think will pass. I don't want to move him. I'm afraid of losing him because he's got, ooh, hold the phone. Yeah, Eddie. Well, he can't shoot this time, but actually those Panzers just rolled into potentially a bad spot. I wasn't even thinking of that at the time. There you go. I think what we'll do is call that here for now. With all the explaining that I've done, instead of just playing the game, probably what we'll do is another scenario where I'll just play. Instead of trying to explain rules and some of my thoughts on why things are the way they are, we'll just play, and then that will cut down a lot of the video time, because I'm sure a lot of this is just me rambling. I don't, I call it rambling, but I'm just trying to share my thoughts and opinions. And I know sometimes people don't want that. They just want to watch the gameplay. Shut up with the commentary, just play. So that's what I'll do next time. I'll do a just play and save the commentary for another time. So I will label this video as, with commentary. So then you can watch it or not. But if you got to this point to hear me say that, then that means you probably watched it. So thank you. But anyway, appreciate you checking it out. And if you have any questions, let me know. And hopefully we'll see you around for the next one. Thank you.